about a seriously ill family member or friend takes up an inordinate amount of space in one's brain, doesn't it? And I think that's the headspace Simon and his brother Andrew and the friends that James and John are in today's passage. They're deeply worried about Simon's mother-in-law who has a fever. And a fever is a worrisome thing, particularly in a time without antibiotics, no Tylenol, no ice. The result was often tragedy. And so I imagine the brothers and James and John being previously in the synagogue, and the man with the demon possession comes in, and Jesus heals him, and then Jesus heals all these people who are sick, and they begin to connect the dots and think, now wait, if this is possible for these people, maybe it's possible for Simon's mother-in-law. Maybe she can be well and this can end okay. And so Jesus decides to go to Simon's house, and there are elaborate hospitality principles around what that looks like. And Simon, of course, wants to honor it. But if you've ever been in the space where you love someone and you're so worried for them, then you understand that when Jesus walks through the door, Peter just spills forth the truth about what's happening in his family. And they forego any kind of bypassing any kind of cultural thing. Jesus doesn't greet any other family members. He goes straight to the room of the sick woman. And can't you picture it? The curtains are drawn and it's dark. And it hangs heavy, shrouded with that sense of sickness. And you can smell death creeping in at the corners. But Jesus walks in with all of his calm authority, not afraid of sickness, and certainly not afraid of entering any presence of pain. And she lays there, and he reaches down and picks up her limp hand, and he raises her. He raises her up from that indented pillow, raises her up from damp sheets, raises her up from sickness to health, raises her up from almost certain death to life. He raises her up, he resurrects her. And yes, it's that Mark intends. The word for raises her up is used again and again in the New Testament to talk about Jesus being raised up from the dead. It's a kind of resurrection moment, the first of them in the Gospel of Mark. And it's not a mistake. Mark wants his readers to view the work of Jesus as constant small resurrections pointing to an ultimate resurrection. Every time he raises somebody up, it's a moment of giving life. It's a precursor to the fact that Jesus himself will be raised from death to life and promises that for all people. And I wonder if we look at our own lives, at the times that grace has found us and raised us up as moments, as glimmers of resurrection. The moments when the shards of our life got just a little smoother, or the broken pieces, two of them at least kind of got put back together, or the depression or the anxiety slightly at least lifted, or the grief or the mourning got just a little bit better, that those are moments of being raised up. They're resurrection moments. Do we look at our lives in that way, and do we find hope in it? Hope isn't about rose-colored glasses or when things are going good. It's for when things are going bad. And we look back and we think of all the ways God has raised us up in the past. We realize there's hope for the present. And I wonder how God has raised you up. And I wonder where hope sits in your own self. The minute she is raised, the woman, the text says, she went and served them, right? And on the one hand, it could be this moment of like, oh yay, she's back to the, quote, women's proper household work, right? But scholars don't really think that's what's going on. Because number one, Mark wouldn't need to write it. The guy has an economy with words. He wouldn't write it because of course that woman would get back to her place, correct? So why mention it? Well, Mark's doing something different here. The word here for service is a word you don't know that you know that you know in Greek. Diakone, we get our word deacon from, which in the Episcopal Church, of course, is an ordained order focused on serving in the world. This word diakone, it means both to serve and ministry, captured in the same word. So it's not that this woman is simply going about giving everybody a plate and a spoon. She's doing ministry. Her response to the grace and the raising up is to go serve in ministry. It's the same word Jesus uses about his own ministry in Mark. When Jesus says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve, he uses that word. And so actually this woman is the first true disciple in the Gospel of Mark. She gets it. She understands that the grace of Jesus Christ has found her, and she responds with a natural act of service and ministry. The disciples are there, but boy, they don't get it yet. And in fact, in the Gospel of Mark, this word is never actually associated with any of them. Fascinating. But I wonder, if we're found by grace and you have grace upon grace, is the natural response to then move forward in service and ministry? Is that how we naturally respond to finding ourselves raised up? It's something that seems to just be the natural result of the love of God finding this woman. And I wonder what happens to us when the love of God finds us. Do we serve? And that service and ministry are tied together. They have something about the table in them. That we're invited always to think of our service as creating a space at the table. That there's a radical kind of invitation and hospitality and welcome in ministry that truly faces out towards the other to really see and really know the other person. And of course, if you think about ministry and service and table, perhaps you might think about this table, which we come to every week and are served bread and wine filled with a grace that sends us back out renewed into the world so that we, to steal a phrase from someone else, might run and not grow weary, and walk and not grow faint. Right? Word about Jesus, as it usually does, travels quickly. Everyone has heard what happened in the synagogue, but it's the Sabbath. And so it's not until evening that the entire town arrives on Simon's door, because they've heard that's where Jesus is. And so every friend and family member and caretaker grab the person in their life that they love and that needs healed, and they come to the door of Simon's house and begin knocking for Jesus to come out. And Jesus comes and he just heals people and casts out demons through the night. And then morning comes. And were I Jesus, I would quickly find my bed and bury myself forever, extroverted out, and sleep. But it's not what Jesus does. He takes himself and he goes away. And he goes away to pray. Because I think Jesus understands the oxygen mask principle, which is you must be filled and know who you are in order to help and have capacity to help other people. And so Jesus goes to sit in the grace of God, to remind himself of what was said at his baptism, that he is the beloved one, to fill himself up again with the compassion of God, so that his ministry of service can actually be loving and compassionate and not rote. And he goes by himself the first chance he gets, and it's essential, it's not a luxury. And of course, Simon's hunting for him. I love the word hunt there. People are like pursuing Jesus. And they find him. And then it's off again. He says, now it's time to go. I came for this. I came to make people whole and well. So next town, buy a bus ticket. I wonder how we create spaces to renew ourselves in God. Because if responding to the grace of God is about ministry and service, you have to be able to see where grace was present. And if we're so disconnected from ourselves and our own being, it's hard to see where God has raised us up. And if we're so disconnected from ourselves, we're often not even aware that we need to be raised up. Our self-awareness just diminishes. And our sense of needing God gets wrapped in a lot of ego-y stuff. And so it's not a luxury to take time to be with God. It's a necessity to take time to be with God. To remind ourselves once more what God said at our baptisms, which is, we are beloved children. To find the forgiveness that leads to self-compassion. It's hard to love others and be compassionate for others if we don't love ourselves and are not compassionate to ourselves. Jesus said, what? Love your neighbor as who? Yourself. It's not egotistical. It's just truth. You don't have capacity for others if you've never learned capacity and patience for yourself. And sitting with God teaches us that, and teaches us grace and mercy, so that our ministries of service aren't rote, aren't depleted, aren't burned out, but are filled with and alive with the compassion and love of God. I love this story. It's not a throwaway story in Mark. It's packed with meaning. This woman is just such an incredible model of discipleship, and it has something to say to all of us. So may we remember when God has raised us up. And may we respond with service and ministry. And may we reclaim space in our days and in our weeks for time with the God who loves us and always comes to raise us up.